took us long enough, but finally we will be able to satisfy all the off-roll support mains by looking at the champion at the very end of League's roster. Zyra was always a heavily requested champion, not really because Zyra would be a popular character. I can certainly find more interesting designs in my garden, but it's more because we have never had a chance to cover her story. Just like Cho'Gath, Kog'Maw and that, Zyra also simply didn't have lore. So now that it's finally different, we can dive into what Zyra even is. So let's start with the basics. First of all, before we even begin, we need to talk about where Zyra is from. While many may expect that she is from Ionia, because she fits the description of the Garden of Forgetting, you can see that she's actually tagged with Shurima. Now don't be scared, Riot didn't move her to the deserts. The name Shurima doesn't refer to the sands or the ruins of the Fallen Empire. Just like Valoran or Ionia, Shurima is the entire continent. So technically, Ikathia, Targon and the Kumungu jungles are all sub-regions of Shurima. But because the Kumungu jungles are the only place without their own region tag, any champion from this region, including Nidalee and Rengar, will show as Shurimans. Neeko is an exception because she's technically from an unexplored island. So now, with this out of the way, let's have a look at Zyra's bio. Zyra became a lot more interesting for one simple reason. Just like Skarner and the Braeckern, Zyra was also revealed to be from a unique race of living organisms. But her race has a little bit of a twist. See, when we look at some of the stranger creatures like the Braeckern, Trolls, Yordles and even the Yetis, all of them are ancient races, some even older than humans themselves. But Zyra's kind was young when the Rune Wars raged, which didn't happen too long ago. By then, humanity already had a rich history. The Three Sisters were long gone, Shurima was in ruins, and the Darkin were also already done with their war. So while Zyra has her own unique race, she's not ancient as many would expect. We could call her very creation an accident. In the hidden jungles south of Kumungu, there is a fabled place known as Gardens of Zyra. There, likely affected by the raging Rune Wars, elemental magics empowered the soil of these gardens. And with time, these soils spawned a new kind of carnivorous plants that preyed upon any creature within reach. But even during the Rune Wars, nourishment was plentiful, and the plants were free to spread around and devour everything they touched. And it was this bulk of flesh-eating plants that we know as Zyra. One time, a small group of soldiers ventured through Zyra's territory. They were looking for a forgotten artifact. The leader of this group was an ambitious sorceress, but her skills were practically useless in an unexplored place where you don't even know what the enemy is. So when the garden itself attacked them with vines lashing through armor and flesh with sadistic ease, they knew this was their end. They fought bravely, but in the end they had to turn to their leader to save them. The sorceress conjured runic symbols, and she blasted the plants with a beam of eerie light. But a tiny spark jumped from the blast, and it ignited the spores and the gases that lingered above the swamps. The magical explosion that followed obliterated every living thing for miles around. After the Rune Wars ended, the Gardens of Zyra became forgotten. No one ever heard about that place, and those who have were wiped out. Centuries passed and it seemed like all was quiet above ground. But in the depths, something stirred. All the magic that devastated these lands slowly settled down again, and in the aftermath of the fallout, only a seed pod remained. It pulsed with unnatural life, until it birthed a confused creature. The entity of plants and flowers was now gifted with consciousness, but its mind was puzzled with conflicting memories. It remembered the warmth of sun, the taste of rain, but also the words of power, and the agony of 100 mortal deaths. This new creature called itself Zyra, without really understanding why. As Zyra ventured out into the wildlands beyond her birthplace, she realized how different she was from everything else. Mortals were fearful and unpleasant things, while the eternal entities were arrogant, and together none of them respected the realms they lived in. This filled Zyra with rage and contempt. She felt like she was the only being that didn't destroy the environment. Quite opposite, in fact. In Zyra's wake, flowers bloomed and evolved at a much faster rate. So Zyra is on her own unique quest now. She is purging all other life forms from the world. But as she does so, she is leaving behind a menagerie of botanical horrors. The interesting thing is that as Shurima rose again, and its rivers were filled with water once more, people noticed strange flora on the riverbanks, slowly spreading west. And no matter how much people pull it from earth or purge it by fire, the growth does not seem to be slowing. As you can see, Zyra's bio on its own is enough to kickstart some theories. First of all, the chances are that it was the sorceress that was reborn in the magically infused seed pod. So Zyra, as in the host of plants, might be using the body of the sorceress now. Also, it is interesting how Riot decided to use Zyra as another enemy for the Shuriman continent. Right now we have Azir's Shurimans, then we have Xerath and his rebels, there is also the Void in the south, Targon technically in the west, Noxus is spreading across the north, and now the new enemy on top of that is Zyra, who is spreading from the east. It is cool to see that Shurima is likely going to become a massive battlefield, and each side will fight for their own reasons. Now, I mentioned that Zyra is leaving some botanical horrors behind, and I understand that you might not really imagine anything under that term. So that's why we got a short story called With the Flowers, to show us what these abominations are. The story begins with a new character called Hateli. She was browsing the dirty wares of the Tonika market. She got interested in a strange tangled bud with red withered leaves, a flower which she had never seen before. But the florist told Hateli that it is probably not the flower that she is looking for. This one was a rare night-blooming zycit, picked in the southern jungles. It was usually used for potions. Instead, the florist showed her a bouquet of Ionian sapphire roses. And while those roses were beautiful, Hateli wasn't swayed. She was interested in exotic specimens like the kraken lilies or Parethan corpse tulips, and so she traded her gold for the zycit. But when she received the zycit wrapped in a piece of silk, she noticed its roots held onto something hard and chalk white. She asked the florist what it was, and he explained that zycits cling to foreign objects, and that one was attached to a piece of bone. In the next scene, Hateli placed the zycit in a pot, and she brought it to her husband, Casworth. In the past, Casworth mentioned that he needed to brighten up his workplace, so a flower was a perfect gift, but he was surprised to see that this flower wasn't very colorful. Hateli explained that it was very rare though. After this, Casworth kissed his wife, and the flower opened up, unfolding into the darkening room. Unfortunately, Casworth was a businessman, and he still had a lot of paperwork ahead of him, so while his wife went to bed, he had to stay up all night to finish his work. But he told Hateli that he would wake her up once the bud began to flower. Later in the night, Hateli woke up to a creeping sensation on her ankle. Probably an infernal skitter ant. They were everywhere this near to the jungle, so she just kicked it away. But then she noticed that the place next to her was empty. Casworth hadn't come to bed, and the annoying skitter ant ran further up her leg. When Hateli flung off the bedsheets, however, she saw no insect. Instead, a tendril vine entangled her ankle, and panic instantly filled her mind. She kicked, but instead of getting it off of her, the vine tightened even more, biting into her flesh. She managed to rip it off with her fingernails, but her hands bled from all the thorns. She armed herself with a lantern and a pair of shears, and she followed the vines to its source. As she traced them throughout the house, she realized she was heading to the study room, where Casworth worked late till night. It took Hateli a number of tries to open the door, and she certainly didn't know what to expect on the other side. The room was covered floor to ceiling with floral growth. A riot of obscene colors danced in the lantern's flicker. Exotic bulbs dangled from the walls, their finger-like leaves undulating as if drawing breath. Flowers seemed to mock her through the darkness, flashing their rainbow petals as signal fires. All had sprouted from a singular dark nexus, an enormous closed flower bud, which lay on the fainting couch by the fireplace, where Hateli herself often read while Casworth worked. Bits of ceramic and soil were spread around. The zycit had outgrown its habitat. All manner of protrusion crept from its pulsating petals. Everything in Hateli's mind screamed for her to flee her home, put it to the torch, and burn that hideous bouquet. But not without Casworth. Vines twisted around the legs of the chair, the legs of the study table, the legs of her husband. Casworth was cocooned from head to toe. Hateli started to frantically cut the vines, but with each snip, the vines tightened more and they grew thorns that cut into her and her husband. Blood was dripping on the floor, but where each droplet landed, a zycit blossom burst out to feed. When Hateli freed one of her husband's hands, it was cold to the touch. After that, a stench filled the air like a rotting corpse. Hateli turned towards the source of the vines. The zycit bud was flowering. It peeled its petals backwards, going through numerous colorful layers, and in the end, it revealed a woman inside. Her hair was blood red, with flesh-like leaves. She walked towards Hateli, and suddenly the stench was gone. Instead, she smelled orange blossoms, sapphire roses, kraken lilies, and other sweet fragrances. All of the smells were vivid, as if she could smell colors. And together, the smells formed a name in Hateli's mind. Zyra. Zyra then thanked Hateli for providing her sustenance to grow, and she nodded towards the corpse of Cosworth. But to grow even further, they needed more sustenance. Hateli had a vision of a world covered in a beautiful bouquet of death, with beautiful colors choking cities. There were no graves, no war, no money. Hateli was breathless. She didn't even notice how the vines buried into her flesh, spilling her blood. She was now one with the flowers. This story kinda brings up more questions than answers, to be honest. For how bland her design is, in my opinion, Zyra's story has a lot of opportunity. But I don't really understand what happened here. Is Zyra, as in the woman, able to travel between her buds? That is a bud with a D, by the way, because I don't really understand how did Zyra grow out of that single bud. I thought that she was already somewhere in the jungles. The bio explained that Zyra was supposed to grow where the explosion happened, and from that place she ventured out and explored the world. Well, she explored Eastern Shurima. So does that mean that when Zyra doesn't have sustenance, she shrinks back to a bud? Honestly, this is something I would love you guys to comment about. I feel like there is a discussion to be had. Maybe I am the dumb person and maybe I am missing something obvious. In which case, absolutely call me out on that. But to close this video, Zyra is a lot more interesting than I thought she would be, and I hope that Riot turns her into a proper threat. And although I think that we didn't really need another threat in the world, there is a lot of opportunity for expansion, no pun intended. So although I am excited about her, Mordekaiser is still coming. So Riot, don't screw him up for me. I am still very much excited about him.
Ah, hello. Hello. Hello there. Hello. Oh, hello there.
Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have need mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.